attending. Please stay on until the end, and please help us to protect our lovely community. You can really make a difference, so please help us. Now I'm now going to pass you over to Rod Baker for his presentation. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
My name is Rod Baker. I live in Edgecott. I've lived here for 26.5 years. I'm not on the Edgecott Parish Council nor the Grendon one, but I just help out with various tasks. And hands up to this one, I am an objector and passionately against this proposal. I am not a professional objector. I've never done anything like this before in my life. I do not know anything about prisons. I've just carried out research recently to get up to speed. And I've never presented on prisons until last Thursday when I presented to the Edgecott Parish Council. Tonight, obviously, it's slightly tricky. I have a dual audience. My first duty is to the residents, but also we have some esteemed visitors from MOJ and associated companies. So good evening to them. I will try and be objective. I will try and be polite, but occasionally, because I'm passionate about this, you may see my passions coming through, but I'm afraid I make no excuse for that. So the next slide. Oops. The objectives of this presentation are firstly to inform, so we get everybody onto the same page, to offer the opportunity to ask and hopefully we can answer questions, to seek input. We don't have a monopoly on good ideas, so anybody else that hasn't been involved in the working party who's got ideas, objections that they haven't heard about, please let us know them. Also, we want to make sure that everyone has access to the information that has been generated to assist any responses that they might want to make. And of course, not everybody's super techie, and there may be some residents who struggle with things like this. I came across somebody the other day, but help them make sure that they could have their word. So that's also very important. The content of the presentation, quickly run through the proposal status and the content of those proposals, look closely at the implications and the impact on our area. Ask the question, because some people don't believe it, can we do anything or is it a done deal? It's not. And look at the work that's been carried out by the local parish councils, especially the integrated group between Grendon and Edgecott. And then come later on to what can residents now do. So the status of the proposal, the first one was published on the 2nd of December, as Kim said. Initial deadline of 23rd of December. That was a dreadful time. Coronavirus was starting to take off again. We're all wondering about what might be happening for Christmas, whether we could see our family we haven't seen for months. And they give us a 3-week deadline for this. Just one word to describe that, absolutely outrageous. There was limited detail on that. It was almost a tokenistic gesture. There was so little detail in it. But this was quickly picked up by the council and by Greg Smith, who asked for an extension and for another version with more detail. The deadline was extended the 29th of January, but for something as big as this, under the current circumstances, it really is a push on time. And that second version appeared on the 18th of December. The contents. There was some justification given for bucks, but I'd ask the question, what is the real reason behind this? They gave a reason, I don't believe it. What is your real reason for choosing Buckinghamshire? This is the bottom line is, this is a part of a political campaign to increase prisons by 18,000. And when politicians exploit crime and sentencing for their own purposes, this always results in prison population increase. This is what's going on, or part of what's going on. The first proposal suggested 1440 prisoners in 6 accommodation blocks, each 4 stories high. Category C prison next to the D and B of Spring Hill and Grendon, who have at the moment current population of 568. And during construction phase, there would be 1,000 contractors on site. And let me just read that again. 1,000 contractors on site during the construction. That's almost the same as the maximum capacity. And on completion, there'd be 500 to 600 new jobs. There'd be new site entrance, car park for approximately 450 cars, And these are the timings that they were suggesting they might be working to if they did go ahead with it. It was, like I said, it was very light on detail. There were some incorrect facts and assumptions, so some misinformation. They clearly don't really know this area. I don't know if any of them have ever visited it. I'd like to know how many times they've walked around the site. And have your say. All comments will be considered and reviewed before a final decision is made. We're bearing in mind all the promises that we've been made by other major construction projects in the area. I'll try and be polite. Please excuse us if we don't trust you. At first sight, with the second proposal, there wasn't much more detail, but as always, the devil's in the detail. Suddenly, they go from 6 to 7 accommodation blocks, or try. So that would take the numbers up from 1440 to possibly 1680. Now that, if they go to 1680 with the current population of Spring Hill and Grandon, that would give us the uncompromising position of being the biggest prison complex in the UK. Plus, they mentioned 3 or 4 times, I think, in the second version, the possibility of expanding the Spring Hill prison. There'd be a perimeter fencing around the site with a road, new bus stop, bicycle shelter, electric charging points. I'll come back to the bus stop and bicycle shelter later. And they were going to demolish some sites to make room for the new build and relocate them, especially the sports field, and definitely come back to that later. There'll be lots of lighting needed because of the nature of what we're talking about, there'll be kennels and the associated noises with that. 4-storey blocks, they said that they would retain some of the existing trees and hedgings and suggested that that would screen this from the locals. This will not be screened under any circumstances. Top of a hill, 4 stories, and we'll see the size of some of these buildings. This will not be screened. You'll be able to see this from Bicester. And don't say that with just lightly. We've had an engineer look into this. They talked about biodiversity, and they talked about other things. And what do you mean by sustainable drainage systems? Perhaps you'd like to enlighten us. What do you mean by water treatment and biodiversity requirements? Please explain. And then I put this in red, and again, I'll try and be polite. This made my blood boil. I had to read this 2 or 3 times. So the first time, in the first one, you said you're going to listen to everything we say and take it into account. Now you suddenly say we can influence things like orientation of the proposed buildings. Who in our village wants to have a say in that? And we can have an influence on proposed building materials. These are going to be made out of precast concrete. What else can we decide? And colours. Are we going to have a referendum on colours across the area because people have different ideas? This was a tokenistic gesture trying to sweeten us. That's what it looks like. In terms of the approach to landscaping, I've definitely got something there for you. I'd like to keep the landscape exactly as it is. It's quite fine. And then there's some key performance indicator targets given under the economic sections. In the previous version, they talked about some achievements at the 5 Wells prison, but they didn't look very terribly interesting or very dramatic. So it looks like they changed those because the indicator targets looked more significant. But when you look into the detail, 50% local employment off-site within a radius of 40 miles. Well, if you think about it and look where this site is, it's within the radius of these precast concrete sites. So that's easy to meet. And 25% local jobs within 25 miles, that sounds good, but that means 75% outside the 25-mile radius. And these other prisons are close to big urban areas, unlike ours. But also there were differences in the proposed site layout. I didn't spot this at first because I looked at the first one, looked at the second one. It was only later I actually did a side-by-side comparison and spotted it. But first of all, just to go to this, which was in the, I think, both of the proposals. And if you can see my cursor, this is the southern part of Edgecott. This is Grandon Road. This is the current road leading into Spring Hill. There's the estate. There's the prison. There's Spring Hill. There's Grandon. This is Willow Lodge on the corner here. So this is where they're talking about putting the car park. This is where the current football field is. This is the pond and some trees here with lots of bird boxes and so on. This is where they're talking about putting the general buildings, and you'll see those outlined in a minute, but just to put it in perspective, this is where they're going to build the accommodation blocks. And this, interestingly, is the only access point to that. So there's a real pinch point in here to get into and out of the site. And also that football pitch, as you see in a moment, wasn't even included in the first draft. It suddenly got dropped off altogether. In the second one, they did include it, and they've now located it here, which you'll see in a moment. So first draft on the left-hand side, second draft on the right-hand side. First thing you notice, this one looks much more environmentally friendly because they've added some green to it. Here, you see the car park in the middle of this field, and there's the entrance into the site. They've got the general buildings here, and the football pitch was there from the slide I showed previously. They've got 6 accommodation blocks in here. In the second one, they've rearranged that, which I'll come back to. They've rearranged the these general blocks here, and they've reconfigured the accommodation blocks. Now, I can quite understand at this stage of planning, there's bound to be some changes. But you tell me, where are you going to fit a 7th into that? That is a very compact, very tight site. They've even managed to squeeze 3 five-a-side football pitches in here, it looks like. But you've got 1,400 prisoners sharing, maybe you can get 18 of those on at a time. And I've expanded this, so I'll go to the next slide. So here we see the thing as a whole. So here we've got the car park. There's the football pitch. I cannot think of a worse place on the whole site to put the football pitch. When it was up here, this part of the village, every time there was a football match, could hear everything that was going on, including the rather colourful language. We've now moved it to here. So those people who were used to hearing that colourful language and the noise going on won't be disappointed, will still be able to hear it because I live just down here. But look here, this big estate, much bigger than this part of the village, where most of the youngsters in the area will be within about 20, the first houses will be in about 20 yards of this. So they will be exposed to everything that goes on here. And what's going to happen when the ball goes over the hedge? A prisoner's going to be going into gardens to collect the ball? Just completely inappropriate to put something like that there. I've scaled it up again just so we can actually read what's here, because in the 2 drafts that came through, you got no chance of reading anything. So here we've got the house blocks, there we've got the five-a-side pitches, here we've got central services, the kitchen, the workshop, the entrance. That's where the current pond is. There's lots of nice trees around here with bird boxes and so on, but this is the main entrance to the site that they'll have to use, as I pointed out earlier. There's a cycle cover, a barrier, and 22 spaces for parking, presumably senior managers and dignitaries. At the other end, we've got the football pitch and the car park. Here's bus stop, an extra bus stop. And these areas, whether they're real ponds or whether catchment areas for the runoff from the tarmac, I don't know. There's going to be a massive amount of water runoff from here and from up the top. But look how close this is to the houses. Absolutely dreadful location. Now what I'd like to do is show you some of the ongoing work at 5 Wells in Wellingborough. And if anyone thinks the development locally will not be too bad, we'll take a look at these. It will be an absolute disaster. This is an aerial view of some of the blocks where they're just about finished. You can see some of the services on top. And here, difficult to tell what all of this is. I don't know what these are. Perhaps our guest could explain to us. Here's some big transit vans, all kinds of stuff down on the floor. But this looks like a big Arctic lorry here. They've got these huge, great big cranes. And look how that is, the building dwarfs this big Arctic lorry. Absolutely astronomical these places are. And look at that. The other thing to notice here, I thought this would be a much lower building than these 4-story buildings. It's not, it's nearly as tall as those. Same over here, same here. These guys are going to get a wonderful view of this. And you can see how massive this complex is. They've actually squeezed 7 into this site, so it can't be quite as big as the site that's up at Grendon. Here again, another aerial view looking over the site. And then this is the height. It's not just 4 stories high, it's 5 stories high. There's your 4 stories for accommodation, but look what's on top. That's another story. All this service equipment. So that puts it into perspective. That's what they're trying to impose on us. On the Wellingborough site, the contract was awarded to Kia. And like I said, they're using precast concrete components. These are manufactured off-site, transported to site on huge, great big Arctic lorries. And they'll be used to using their own contractors, large contractors used with a caravan of trade contractors across the country. They won't be going to Joe Bloggs down the road to see if they can help out. They'll be using ones they already use, ones they're familiar with. So will there be anything of substance for local businesses? Materials will be sourced from national suppliers, not local companies. They won't be going to Aylesbury or Bicester or Buckingham to try and buy things. 22 of those employed in Wellingborough lived within a 25-mile radius. But again, 78% are coming from further afield. And don't forget, Wellingborough is much closer to the large urban area than we are. So those figures could be even worse in this locality. So implications and impact on the local residents. This development will have a major detrimental impact on us, on the area. From what you've just seen, do not underestimate the scale. It would change Grendon, Underwood, Edgecott and the locality forevermore. It's just not a 2 or 3 job. This is forevermore. Our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren won't thank us if we let this go through without a fight. So the location. Well, how many sites have been assessed? How many other sites have been properly assessed? Coming back to how can you justify this site? What is the benefit of this site? If you had a blank canvas, would you choose this site? No architect in their right mind would choose this site. It is a greenfield site and too large a development for this rural area. It's much more suitable for a brownfield site. And I've just put in here Future Prisons Policy Exchange 2013. You would not believe how many policy documents, reviews and so on I've read over the last 10 days. This was a very well-written document. Future Prisons, Policy Exchange is one of the top think tanks in the country. And in 2013, so this is some years ago, they were recommending for the future of prisons, and let's face it, prisons are in chaos, not the MOG's fault, it's government, it's politics, it's everything. There's been lack of investment in the causes of why people go into prison, let alone in the prison themselves. But what they were recommending is a lot of the old prisons, where a lot of the big problems are, should be closed down. And new hub prisons should be built with 2,500 to 3,000 prisoners. So you get a lot of sharing of facilities. And they recommended that these should all be on brownfield sites. New brownfield sites should be located, that these should be next to big urban areas. So you've got staff, so that prisoners will be close to their relatives, etc., and that they should have good public transport. Well, if you assess the site they're talking about near us, it's not brownfield, it's not near a big urban area, and it doesn't have good public transport. So it doesn't meet any of the criteria that were being talked about in 2013, 8 years ago. There's so many of these documents, such valuable documents have been just tossed on somebody's shelf somewhere gathering dust. Also, this prison would be twice the population of that of Edgecott and Grendon combined, giving a great imbalance between prisoners and the local population, as well as being probably the largest in the UK. Sorry, my voice is going a little bit. The visual impact on landscaping, we're going to lose greenfield space, and there'll be less space between Edgecott and the prison. And it is, I say it again, it is not possible to screen such tall buildings unless you're going to dig them down about 10 meters into the ground. The traffic, we've got a big issue here, and this is a cumulative impact. And there are 2 phases for this. The first is the construction phase, when we've got all these big lorries coming in. We've got 1,000 contractors getting to site every day. And then after completion, we've got 500-600. I think the numbers may even be higher if they manage to get in the 7th accommodation block, because they have more prisoners, more staff required. So 500-600, 700, maybe even more. When I think HMP Berwyn was put in place, they underestimated the amount of staff. They had to take on more. So that hundreds and hundreds of journeys every day could be increasing the traffic through our village by at least 1/3. We're already struggling to cope with HS2 and EWR traffic. And I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm so fed up. with all these big lorries going past my house every day. The house shakes almost every time a lorry goes by. In the summer, you can't open the window, the front of the house, because you can't hear yourself think. Go out in the street, you can't talk to people when these lorries are going by. And you guys from MOJ want to come and walk down some of the footpaths near us, especially when the footpath is adjacent to the road. If you've got a 30, 40 ton lorry going past 2 feet away from you, and most of them are going in excess of 30 miles an hour, is a pretty scary experience. There'll be a significant increase in the volume of traffic, including the local rat runs. It won't just be the main roads to here. You talked in your proposal about talking to the council on managing traffic. No, it won't be managing the traffic, it'll just be more traffic. And the traffic plan for new staff to minimise journeys, I'll talk to that in a moment, it is just unviable. There'll be environmental aspects, more traffic, more pollution, more lights, more light pollution, more concrete, more risk of flooding. Public footpaths, there's some nice footpaths, some nice walks around some of the wildlife parts of the prison. They're under threat. Wildlife, we've got some wonderful wildlife around here. There's the kites, there's the kestrels, there's other birds of prey, there's owls, there's lots of small birds, there's bats, there's foxes, there's deer, there's voles, there's rabbits. The prison has done a fantastic job creating little wildlife sanctuaries. You say you're going to protect those, but having thousands of contractors going through that bottleneck every day is going to disturb and unsettle some of the wildlife who will disappear and never come back again, whatever you say. The local infrastructure is going to put enormous pressure on the drains and sewers. Maybe you're going to tell us that you're going to put a new sewage system up there to cope. With 2,000 people on site, that's a lot of shit. You know what to get rid of. So where's that going to go? All the rainwater, where's that going to go? You could perhaps collect that, treat it, and use it to flush some of the toilets, but that's a mere drop in the ocean. The current sewers will not cope with it. And it's going to put an unacceptable increase in demands on local ambulance, fire, police, and doctors. Whatever you say, wherever there's a prison, the requirements for those services go through the roof. Housing. This is happening. This is not something that might happen. This is happening already. You mentioned in your in the questions answers in both of your proposals that you got no evidence of how prices drop. Well, guess what? Have you ever gathered any data to prove it? Can you give us some evidence that house prices don't drop? Well, I can tell you they're going to drop here. There are 5 houses for sale in Edgecombe, and 3 of them have fallen through just because there's a possibility of building a prison. One of them was right through to the final stages, and a last-minute search popped up to show that there was a new prison, and the buyer dropped it like a hot potato. The people in the house were already packing their boxes. It'd taken them ages to find the right house, and that's all fallen through. They are absolutely devastated. And 2 others were just getting to the final stage of offers. This came up, dropped like a hot potato. If they still want to sell their properties, what can they do? They can't wait till 2007 till it's been built, until things are settled down again. They're going to have to drop their price. The other thing about housing you have to consider, if you've got 500, 700 new staff around here, there isn't the houses. These people are going to be scattered over a very wide area. There are something like 450 people at staff at Grendon and Spring Hill prisons. 4 of them live in Grendon Underwood. So if you get 500 to 700, maybe 5 will live in the local area. The others will have to travel a long way. So that's where your travel plans fall apart. So Category C prison, there is already concern that any escapees would be more dangerous. You're going to tell us it's secure. Please give us the numbers for the number of people who have escaped from Category C prisons for the last 5 years, year on year. It probably is none, and you may well be right in that count, but you won't.
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the...
Sorry, you're talking to me. Okay, economic aspects. There appears to be little chance of economic benefit to locals during the construction, and there will be at the end of it challenging recruiting and retaining prison staff. All that 500 to 700 won't be prison officers, but the current prisons find it difficult to retain staff and keep having to recruit. And the further potential development, if you get a 7th block in and expand Spring Hill, that's going to be more pressure on local resources, more traffic. And the proposal itself, I've never seen so much anger and stress that came out of that initial proposal, coming out of the blue, especially at this moment in time. It's not your fault there's a coronavirus pandemic, but it means that we can't have exhibitions, we can't have public meetings. And that all came up with that 3-week notice, approaching the most difficult Christmas period there's been since the Second World War. That's how bad it was. And the second proposal, yes, a bit more detail, yes, a bit more of a deadline, but it was inconsistent and in places extremely patronising. So can we do anything? This is now to the residents. Should we sit back and simply state, it's clear this is a done deal, or going to be rolled over again? And if we do that, it will, guess what? It will be a done deal. They'll just go through with it. They'll roll over us. They'll just ride roughshod over us. So what are the chances of preventing this? They are real. You have to believe they're real. We have to believe they're real, and we have to do something about it. Like Kim said, we're confident of support from our MP and county councillors, but to stand a chance, we have to have a clear strategy and be very objective about this. Yes, my passions are coming through. I'm also an objective person. There's nothing wrong with being passionate if you believe in something. I know there's a quote here from one of the Wellingborough residents. This was taken from quite a long piece he wrote, but this is so fundamentally important. And he said, what I mean here is for the local people to have a genuine voice in determining how their lives are shaped, rather than simply accepting the top-down decisions from politicians and other bureaucrats. So we're not just going to lie down and take it. Now, the work that's been carried out by Grendon Underwood and Edgecote Parish Councils independently and together. Obviously, all the work's been done under the COVID restrictions, plus over the Christmas and New Year period. The strategy was agreed, a list of objections has been generated in different formats, and that list of objectives initially ran to 11 A4 pages, but it's now been rationalised, listed by category, and also, and I did this myself and then it was checked, went through the claims in the 2 MOJ proposals and did a reality check. This is what they claim, this is the actual reality. That's been shared with other parish councils, with our MP, local councillors. Flyers, like Kim said, have been sent round to inform residents and other parish councils. And we want to make sure that all residents have their say and can submit objections before it's too late. And I just wanted to touch on this. Boris Johnson loves his 3-word phrases: get Brexit done, build, 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 tough on crime. Well, we've got one as well. It's strength in numbers. And the acronym, unfortunately, for that is SIN, of course, S-I-N, SIN, but we are not the sinners. Now, this is one of the formats that I mentioned. So this is where we've got the MOJ claim and the reality check. So let's just focus on the bottom one for a moment. This is your outline travel plan. Very nice in theory. I admire you for putting it together. So you're going to encourage people to travel to work by sustainable modes: walking, cycling, public transport, and car sharing amongst staff and visitors to the prison. Well, let's go through that. You mentioned 3 bus services: the 5, the 16, the 677. The 5 is a Quarrendon service, doesn't come within 8 miles of Edgecote. The 16 does actually come to Edgecote on about an hourly basis, and the first bus to arrive at the prison gate in the morning is at 10:30. The 677, 2 of us have tried, and we cannot find any evidence of this bus existing. Whether that's the number of a new bus service that you're going to put into place, we've got no idea. So at the moment, we've got 1 bus service that comes once an hour. The roads are too dangerous for many people to even consider cycling. I wouldn't cycle on this road to work. It depends how far you're going, of course. And people who, as I said before, are going to be living quite a long way away. So not many people are going to walk to work either. Car sharing, they're going to be spread over such a wide area. It's going to be very difficult for you to get any car sharing system in place. And also, have you checked with the current officers, the current prison staff, how many of those cycle to work? How many of those use car sharing? I have never seen a car leave the prison or go into the prison. I don't stand there watching, believe me, but I can't remember ever seeing one with more than 1 person in the car. I may be wrong, hands up if I'm wrong, but I've never seen it. And this is the other format. So heading, some of which I've shown you before. Oh, sorry, going back to that previous one, that ran to 7 pages. This one runs to 6 pages, but this is just a brief summary. And so we've got various headings. This is just some of them, not all of them, and then expanded objections. So other aspects, and this shows a little bit of sympathy towards what goes on in our area, because we're local. We try and live with what's going on around us. So the current prison, there has been a long-term relationship. It's been going since the 50s. There used to be more people employed up there when it first came in because agriculture was suffering. Not many jobs left in the land, so a lot of people went to the prison. That's not the case anymore. So if we get this massive expansion, the long-term relationship between the prisons and the local, that's going to be affected. It's going to be lost. What about the impact on the current inmates? See, we're even thinking about the inmates. Have you? These guys are going to be close to 1,000 people coming on site, all the noise, the cranes, the dust, the dirt. What impact is it going to have on them? Or are you going to relocate them somewhere else? Will this have mental health issues? Will it mean that some of the ones in the open prison are trying to abscond or escape? Will we see more of those running around the place? Or will there be an increased rate of emergency call-outs because more are suffering from mental health issues, more are taking drugs to try and escape what's going on next door to them? And when the prison is built, if it is, how would you populate it? It was interesting what they did in Berwyn. Obviously, you can't put everybody in overnight, and opening a new prison must be a massive task. Recruiting prison officers, especially over the number of prisons, you're talking about 3,500 prison officers. And the experience of prison officers has gone down dramatically. End of the austerity, numbers were cut by 25%. And if you get inexperienced prisoners and inexperienced prison officers and experienced prisoners, you get carnage, as there was at HMP Berwyn. Talking about Berwyn, I won't go through all these facts and figures. They are very interesting, but this was built in 2017 in Wales at a cost of 220, GUPC training prison, and it was sold to the Welsh on the basis of housing locals. In the end, actually, 75% of the residents were from England, so the Welsh were not very happy with that. And this was supposed to be a beacon for future prisons. So I'd ask you, what lessons have you learned from this? Because it wasn't really a bright beacon, it was more like a wet candle. And I have read the report that was carried out in 2019 in great detail. I've also seen the Financial Times articles that were written about this prison and all the problems. Yes, there were some positives, but there were a lot of negatives. So what lessons have you learned from this to apply to future prisons, wherever they're built? So in this call, what can residents do? Questions and answers. Like I said before, other thoughts and ideas very welcome. Let's pool our resources to get the best out of this. Any residents in need of some assistance in responding, let us know. Or talk to a neighbour, talk to somebody you know, somebody you trust. Make sure we get as many responses submitted as possible. Make them personal to you. Yes, pick the things that people are raising, but if you've got a personal story related to that, make it count, put that forward. And make sure every person in each household responds. Not there's two of you, not just one of you, and think you've done your job. You should each respond, each have your say. And if you've got teenagers in the house, they should also respond. It's their future estate, not just ours. If they stay in the area, they're going to have to live with this as well, and their children. And also, if you responded before the second proposal was made public, you can send a further response in. You may have made your response on the back of the first proposal, which we said was very light in detail. Other things have happened. Other people may have thought of objections since you made yours that you hadn't thought of at the time. So put in a second proposal that has been accepted as a legitimate way. And contact your neighbours, anyone else that's not on this call tonight. And if you've been inspired by this or you think this is a good thing to do, and spread the word and make sure you meet the deadline of 29th of January. I think it's 6 p.m. in the evening, but make sure you meet that deadline. Anything afterwards won't be counted. Other things, there'll be a meeting in the Bucks Council Cabinet on the 25th of January, where they will consider it. They will give a response to the MOJ at this stage. And it's then up to the MOJ to listen to our responses, decide whether they're going to go ahead and submit for planning approval. And if the planning is submitted, the public will just have 21 days. So we won't have long if we want to make any further objections. And obviously only planning aspects will be considered at this point. And I can reassure residents that we will be working on this well before, just in case it goes into planning. When that 21 days comes, we will have a whole host of things to put forward. Now, this is just a slide that was put in at the last minute, and this is really outlining what I said at the beginning about this being a political thing. This is a flawed strategy. In the manifesto that Boris put forward, he talked about levelling up, only 2 words this time, levelling up, utilising brown sites for development, trying to tackle employment. Well, the local unemployment around here is around 3%. We're even lower than a lot of the other areas in Buckinghamshire. But there are areas with unemployment between 7 and 9%. Those are the deprived areas. Those are the ones that need levelling up. We have got so much construction going on around here. HS2 and EWR, which we mentioned, the permanent HS2 depot at Calvert, less than 5 miles away. Westcott Venture Park, 4 miles away. Silverstone, 15 miles away. Aylesbury Woodlands, 15 miles away. And Wellingborough, it's only 40 miles away. That's putting 2 big prisons within close reach of each other. So North Bucks does not need levelling up. We've had enough levelling up, thank you very much. So this large, and having another large project contradicts government policy. So why is it happening? Why has it even been thought about? So summary, sorry I've gone on. Lifelong detrimental change for Grendon, Underwood and Edgecott, plus the surrounding area. Don't underestimate it. Do not underestimate the effect it will have, the scale it will have for one moment. And if we sit on our backside, no action equals no result. This is our future, not just the MOJ. This is our future. We want to have a say. We have got strength in numbers. And this is just not a moment in time. This is a Nike problem, a Nike moment in time. So let's tackle it together. Let's go for it. Thank you very much.
Rod, thank you very much indeed. You've put so much work in, both parish councils have and surrounding community. Thank you so much. That was excellent. What we'll do is we'll speed along. As I say, we'll cover questions and answers at the end of the second presentation. So Jack from MOJ, I believe that you're going to take charge of the screen now for your presentation.
Thank you, Kim. Good evening, everyone. Just by way of introduction, my name's Robin Seaton, and I work for the Prison and Probation Service, and my role is Programme Director for the New Prisons Programme, of which the proposal next to Grendon Spring Hill is a part. So I'm responsible for that programme, delivery of that from end to end. I'm joined by a number of my colleagues, and they'll introduce themselves as we go through the different sections of the presentation. So I wanted to start by thanking you, Kim, and your colleagues on Grendon Underwood Parish Council for inviting us here as part of the consultation on the proposed new prison. Normally, we would come down for, or come up for, depending on where we are, for a few days, have a bit of consultation in person, have some conversations. Unfortunately, obviously, at the moment, that's not possible. So this is the best that we can do under the current pandemic circumstances, I think. So we wanted, following Rod's presentation, to give you as much information as we're able to at this stage to kind of talk through some of our thinking and to understand more. Although having had Rod's very clear presentation, we may have understood quite a lot from that, I think, about your views on the proposals and what we could do to reflect on those and adapt to them, recognise the strength of feeling, and I know a lot of people may well be in the position of saying there is no good version of the proposals, but we wanted to reflect on your feedback and think about how we could change and adapt. So I'll just, by way of introduction, kind of cover the background and the context to the new prisons programme that we're working on, and to this proposal and to this consultation. And then I'll hand over to some colleagues who will speak in a bit more depth about things like the design, thinking about the site, prison operations, ecology, traffic, and hopefully we can pick up a lot of the points that were made earlier on the way through. And we'll touch again on the planning permission process at the end. So The new prisons programme, as was flagged earlier, is part of the wider agenda on crime and justice that the PM and the government have. That's absolutely right. And this is partly about the way that the prison service responds to changes further up in the criminal justice system. So the investment in 20-odd thousand more police and some of the sentencing reform that's been proposed drives an increase in the number of people in prison, and we need to respond to that. And as rightly identified earlier, there's a wider programme of about 18,000 prison places that are being delivered to respond to that. It's not just a programme about volume and numbers, though. That would be quite wrong of us. It's also a programme that is about having modern, secure, efficient, well-designed prisoners that give governors and people who work in prison in various different roles the tools that they need to help prisoners turn their lives around and tackle their offending behaviour. So it's absolutely not the kind of not a kind of warehousing response to that challenge. Other things that are worth saying is that, as I say, it's part of a batch of 4 that we're talking about, a group of 4 prisons that we're building in various different locations across the country, and it follows what we've been doing at 5 Wells, as we're calling now the prison at Wellingborough, and the one that we've got in train at Glenparva as well. And this is enables us to learn as we go along. Also enables to generate some economies of scale, it's true, and to drive some consistency in the design across these prisons. So it's, excuse me. I think at 5 Wells and Glenparva, we've got reasonably good at responding to community concerns over the last few years. I'd like to get us to a similarly good position here. And I think it's worth talking now about how we got to proposing to build a new prison in this particular location. A couple of things on that. Why here and why not somewhere else? So, as I say, we need to build 4 prisons in different regions of the country where there is a demand for prison places over the next 5, 10, 15 years or so. And we need to do so relatively swiftly, in line with the number of people that we think will be coming into the system. What we've done is to look at all of the MOJ and HMPPS's land in various different places around the country. And we've also worked with other government departments to look at which bits of their land is available as well. And then we've applied a kind of practicality assessment to work out what of the available options is deliverable. As part of that, we did talk to the MOD about all of their spare or what spare land they might have. They didn't put the land near Bullingdon on the table as part of that discussion. Just turning to the process that we're in now, the pre-planning consultation that we're running, that's live, and that this conversation is part of. So the purpose of that, from my point of view, from our point of view, is the opportunity to consult with you as the people who live nearest to the proposed sites and are kind of most affected by it, and understand your feedback and to see whether or not, as I say, we can change and adapt. Of course, I should say, I should be really clear that we haven't decided to put in a planning application yet. This is a consultation, and it is, as you rightly say earlier, not a done deal. So we will need to take that decision after the end of this consultation. I should say I think it's been pretty clearly trailed. We're looking for feedback on the website and via whatever other means we've got available. I think we've flagged those at the end of the presentation, so I do encourage folk to feedback through whatever mechanism works best for you. Right, and the only other thing I was going to sort of add to that was just to say that as was pointed out earlier, clearly if we do get to submitting a planning application, there is the opportunity to feed back into that planning process via the kind of the council's portal, I think is the right term for it, on it. That was all I was going to say by way of introduction. I'm going to hand over to one of my colleagues now for the next section. Nick, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Dan. I am Head of Mobilisation for Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, and I'm responsible for ensuring the operational viability of the design of the prison through the construction stage and then through to full operation. And my background as a career as a prison governor, and I've governed both high security and open prisons as part of my career. Robin's spoken about the plans for the prison estate wider, and it's worth mentioning that also what is happening within the prison estate is that the prison service is redefining its 100+ prisons into 3 different categories. They are a reception prison, and that is a prison that is responsible for taking individuals directly from the courts on remand or at point of sentence from the courts. They are a training prison, which is responsible for training those held in custody across all the different categories, security categories within the prison. And then the new type of prison that we are creating is a Category C resettlement prison, or resettlement prisons across the board, because we can have Category B resettlement prisons as well. So what that is creating is a very clear purpose for these prisons, and it creates a clear journey for someone who is convicted by the courts, who would go into a reception prison, and then their journey through their sentence would then take them to a training prison and then through to a resettlement prison. So the proposal here is for the lowest risk of closed prison, a Category C resettlement prison, and its specific aim is to resettle those men that are held there in custody straight from the prison upon release into the local area. And I say the local area because a resettlement prison's purpose is to ensure that those people that live within 90 minutes of the prison are resettled into their local area where they live. So, for example, we are not resettling a gentleman from Buckinghamshire from a prison up in Newcastle and putting him on a train down to Buckinghamshire. So then the whole new plan is to ensure that the prison estate is both modern and efficient, but also has a clear defined journey for those that are in custody. And what you have on the current site at the moment, you have the Category B prison and you have the Category D open prison. And what this prison will do will then create a full journey for anyone that falls into the criteria within that 90-minute journey, that instead of them being moved from different prisons and different geographies throughout the country, a gentleman from Buckinghamshire, for example, could maintain a journey that starts at a local reception prison, and that might be at Wood Hill. And then if he's categorised as Category B, he could then come over to Grendon, then through to the new prison, and then either released from the new prison or go on to Spring Hill as a Category D prisoner in the open estate. So in effect, you are creating a whole journey on this one particular site. As mentioned in the first presentation, the current planned population is 1,440 men. That is across 6 house blocks, and each house block of 240 men. And the way that we've designed that to ensure that the prison's purpose around resettlement is met is that each of those floors on the house blocks that you saw are all distinct and individual and house 60 men. So you may have seen some of the old TV with porridge and the clanging and the 4 floors, etc., of the metalwork. These are very modern prisons, digital prisons, but we design them as well so these 60 men that live together live in a community which we know help them with their resettlement and also with their rehabilitation. And it was mentioned earlier, modern prisons are more efficient to operate and more easier to work in for those employed there, but particularly again for the men that will live there, it provides a very decent living environment. You saw on the slides on the first presentation the prison that we are currently mobilising in Wellingborough, and what we've been doing on our journey is taking the learning from that prison in Wellingborough. The second prison is being built in Leicester, and we're taking learning from that. So we're ensuring that as we progress through our journey in building these new prisons, that we are learning from each piece of construction to ensure at each time they are better, and whether that's better through slight design tweaks or better through building it so it's more beneficial to the environment. So in summary, what we have here is a prison that is being designed and will be operated with rehabilitation and resettlement at its core, but primarily as well, so is the security. As I said, it's a category C prison, and it will hold the lowest risk men in that environment in a secure prison with a fence around it. And these are the men that are coming to the end of their sentence and are ready for either release or to move into the category D open estate, like we have at HMP Spring Hill on site. Thank you. Phil, I think it's over to you. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. My name's Phil Cronshaw. I'm the senior project manager who's responsible for the 4 new prisons. I wanted to just have a quick 5 minutes of your time, just to talk to you and to touch upon some of the benefits that we would expect to see through the building of the new prison, focused on mainly some of the benefits that are being derived currently from the building of the new prison at 5 Wells in Wellingborough and also at Glenparva, but looking to see how we can take the lessons learned, as Nick said, from those prisons and look to emulate them and improve on them for a new prison at Grendon and Spring Hill. So just a few sort of key stats really. In terms of the work at Wellingborough, what we have done, and I think Roger referred to some of these stats in his presentation, but and we've got some slightly updated numbers, but I mean, we have actually created sort of 200 new jobs at Wellingborough, full-time jobs on the construction site, recognizing that there is a lot of labour that comes in and goes out sort of day in, day out, but we have actually created 200 jobs on site which are not filled by short-term subcontractors. It's important to know a benefit of that is actually 12 of those sites, 12 of those jobs that we have actually created are actually now being filled by ex-offenders. So part of that rehabilitative culture that the building of these new prisons will bring. 8 of those are actually on day release. So they are actually on day release from existing prisons coming towards the end of their sentence. And we do actually have 1 ex-offender on site at the moment who started on site on day release, has now finished his sentence and now has actually secured a full-time job on site working with the construction company. And we're hoping that we can actually increase on those numbers as the construction commences. In terms of work on site, we have actually created 34 apprenticeships in construction on the site at Wellingborough, and something that we would look to emulate at Glenparva and also at the prison at Grendon and Spring Hill. And as part of that, we've provided training to 630 people, both men and women, on construction activities and on construction training through the programme. Roger mentioned that 22% of the people working on site live within a 25-mile radius. I think the most up-to-date figures we've got is actually it's around about 35% of those people that are actually working on sites. A much higher proportion now do live within the sort of local area. On top of which, we are currently in the process of spending up to £50,000 with the local voluntary and social enterprises in the locations close to the sites at Wellingborough and Glenparva. And some of the benefits outside of the pure construction site is the contractors at Wellingborough and Glenparva have actually done a lot of work with the local schools and with the local community to sort of work to enhance the facilities. One of the particular items that we are quite proud of is a donation that the contractor has actually given to a local school up at Wellingborough of 16 iPads to the local school to help the children with the schooling during the COVID pandemic and with the schools being closed. So there are significant sort of benefits that we can actually bring. We did mention that there will be sort of post-construction, once the prison comes into operation, there will be around 500 to 600 permanent jobs on site, and they're not just prison officers. Yes, prison officers will make up a proportion of those, but there is a wide-ranging job opportunities for people on site, including psychologists, healthcare workers, teachers in education, chefs and caterers working in the kitchens, and there are also roles in human resources, in finance, in general sort of admin as well at the prison, and also roles for psychologists and the like. So we would want to work with the local community just to on some of those benefits that we can actually bring directly to Grendon, Spring Hill and the surrounding area. And there are measures that we can actually put within our contracts around some of those delivery of some of those benefits and some of those key performance indicators to make sure that we get some of the benefits absolutely back into the local community. So that's pretty much just what I wanted to touch on. I'll now pass on to Tim, I think.
Hi there, everybody, and good evening. I'm Tim Irons. I'm the design director from Perfect Circle, Pick Everard, leading the design on the Grendon Spring Hill proposals. And I'm just going to go through some of the design of the proposals just to clarify some of that information to you, some of which Rod has already done very well, so I apologise in advance if I repeat anything that Rod has already covered in the first presentation. So just in overview, the site proposed is a 12.42 hectare parcel of land adjacent to HMP Spring Hill and HMP Grendon, just outside the village of Edgecott. It wraps around the two existing facilities, bounding them tightly to consolidate development. To the north and east, the site is undeveloped agricultural land. Residential properties, many previously associated with the prison estate, are located to the southwest. And to the west of the site is Grendon Road, from which access to the two existing prisons is currently accessed. This site now shows that a bit clearer. Actually, sorry, if you can just pass on that site, I think I've covered that. Thank you, sorry. This slide now shows that a little bit clearer in the arrangement of the site. You can see the red area in both the aerial view and the top right image is the parcel of land being proposed. And again, you can see it wraps around the existing facilities of Grendon and Spring Hill. It's characterised by three distinct areas. An area to the west, which is currently open grassland opposite the residential properties. A main section to the north where the majority of development is proposed. And a further area to the east, which is currently fully fenced and unused, but under MOJ ownership. If we move on. So the proposals comprise 12 main buildings, so 6 house blocks, which provide living accommodation for the residents, a small care and separation unit for residents requiring closer monitoring from time to time. That's the small building you can see to the east of the northern 2 house blocks in the plan, a 2-storey elevated building there adjacent those 4-storey house blocks. Then the largest building that you can see on the site is the industries building. That's the building that is to the south of the site, adjacent to the existing facilities there. That building comprises workshops and vocational teaching spaces as part of this rehabilitation progressive re-educating of the residents within the prison. The building to the north, on the north side there.
I'm sorry, but there's no compass on the plan. We don't know what you're talking about.
Sorry, the site plan is orientated with north
Mike,
to the top.
Excuse me, Tim. Mike, can you please ensure that everybody is on mute, because it will put people off their flow when doing the presentation. Can you please use the chat box? Thank you.
Yeah, apologies for that. The Central Services building is really a normalised community looking building. It accommodates the education spaces for the prison, faith spaces, primary healthcare space, and gym facilities. It really looks like a community building you would find in any local urban area in reality. It also includes a small facility for processing residents as they enter and exit the building. The plan that you can see on the slide there shows in the key there the areas of the site that will be private and will be fully fenced by the closed prison, and those areas that will be maintained and accessible to the public. Just going back to the other buildings on the site, there's a kitchen building which will provide all the cooked meals for the prison, and a support building which is home to the facilities, management and maintenance functions. And finally, at the very front of the prison development, there will be a what we call an entrance resource hub. It's the building where the visiting functions for residents and families exist, the processing of staff, visitors and residents coming and leaving the facility, and some centralised staff and security functions, including the main prison gate. As many of you will know, there's a number of public rights of way around and across the site at the moment that are used and enjoyed by local people. These will all be maintained, albeit some may need to be rerouted slightly to allow the proposals to be brought forward. There's also a new football pitch proposed close to Gwendon Road and opposite the residential buildings, which Rod covered in his presentation previously. The car parks that will run alongside these will be landscaped, and just picking up on one of the comments that came up in the chat about that area flooding, a sustainable urban drainage system will be incorporated with the water from that car parking area managed and attenuated into the infrastructure of the site in due course. So there should be no flooding associated with that car park. If we can move on, please. Thanks. So this is a concept visual that has developed. This shows the public-facing edge of the building. So to the left of that visual is the entrance resource hub, and through the trees there, the kind of ziggurat roof you can see there is the workshops building. We've used some transparency just to allow you to see what might be seen in kind of the winter period of the year, where you see through that wooded area. We're trying to retain that ecological asset as far as possible, and there will be some expansion of that and increase in ecological areas as part of the approach to the landscaping proposals. But it will give a very different experience to residents and visitors approaching this building. This prison will have quite an unusual characteristic as a result. The entrance resource hub itself, again, a very community looking building. The design of it is intended to mimic community buildings that you might find in any town centre or urban area. This second visual shows the view of the front, just in very concept terms, once you're forward of that that set of trees there, and you can see it is, you know, in form and in composition, something you might quite readily see in a town centre, etc. It was touched on in Rod's slide deck about the suitability of this site, and you know, without doubt it has some challenges to it. It is quite a sloped site, and you'll know that there is a ridge line that runs kind of north-south across the site, so kind of dividing that main central area of the site where the development is proposed, and the site slopes in both directions, forming the hill. What we're seeking to do is to minimise the visual impact of the prison, as you might expect. We don't want it to impact anybody who lives locally, or certainly we want to mitigate that as far as possible. And the way we do that is by ensuring that the lowest buildings, so the buildings, the central services hub, the kitchen, and the workshops, which are all kind of 1, 2 and 3 story buildings, occupy that bit of the site that is at its highest. We're actually looking to reduce the level of the ridge of that hill as well, to further mitigate the impact of the massing in that area. And then the house blocks, which yes, absolutely are taller. We have sought to push those as far down the east of the site as possible, and we will be terracing the site if the proposals move forward, so that the height of those buildings the impact of the height of those buildings is reduced as far as possible. And then remembering that the whole site is then enclosed by a 5.2 metre fence that will screen that as well. The other thing I really wanted to touch on is that these are new prisons. We've been developing them with the MOJ for a number of years. They support a really major focus of the MOJ to improve the sustainability and green credentials of their estate. You'll all know that much of the MOJ estate is still quite historic, Victorian in parts, and doesn't perform as well as we would like it to. And so this is a move towards creating prisons that are far more sustainable and leave much less of a footprint on our planet. So we're looking towards 70% zero carbon for the operational energy. So that's the energy required to run the site, to heat it, to do the cooking, and to light the rooms when they need lit. The site will be predominantly electric, so getting away from using fossil fuels, and much of that energy we will be looking to generate actually on site through solar panels, voltaics, and heat pumps and the like. Happy to provide some further information that expands on that in simple terms. We'll be using electric charging points for vehicles that visit the site to make sure that we are promoting green transportation as far as possible. And the buildings themselves, the way in which they're constructed, the materials they're constructed, and the way in which they're constructed, the whole way we do that is to reduce the amount of carbon in them themselves, and also so that they are as thermally sound as possible to reduce heat loss through their operation. We're also looking, as part of the industries piece, to see if there are ways to find synergies with the local waste energy plant that you'll know is in your locality. I think that's all I wanted to say. Sorry, there is some future proofing in terms of being able to then enable the prison buildings for more emerging technologies. So we always think about that and make sure that we can there is an amount of adaptability in our designs to allow for those emerging technologies. So yeah, go on now, thank you. In terms of accreditation, this will be the first BREEAM outstanding targeted prison building in the country. So an absolute move on from what we've done before. We talked about the ecological assets on the site, and it is a very nice site in its existing format, and there are some great ecological assets already there. As I said, we want to maintain those as far as possible. We've actually got a target to provide 10% biodiversity net gain, so actually 10% more biodiversity by the time the development would be finished, and that means adding extra in, finding other areas around the prison to be able to introduce planting and trees and provide habitats for animals to move into. Yes, there is always some disruption whilst the actual construction is being undertaken, but even that we look to mitigate, put mitigation measures into it. And the BREEAM process, which is a BREE Institute accredited scheme, seeks to control those and aligns credits with the design of and construction of the prison to achieve that. Water is another item, and we'll be looking to potentially use potable water, grey water recycling. They're all incentives that are currently on the table and being looked at the viability for this site. And then I'll just touch on one of the comments that came out previously in terms of kind of the infrastructure of the site. So all the infrastructure for the site is provided as part of the design. We know there are issues with the current infrastructure, so where it has to be dealt with on a local basis, that would be the strategy that is employed. So there should be no adverse impact on any of the existing infrastructure around the prison. Thanks. I'll pass over now to our planning colleague. Sorry, we can't hear you.
Are we waiting for Jack?
Yeah, Katrina.
Katrina, yeah. Katrina, we can't hear you, I'm afraid. Please bear with her for a couple of moments while she sees if she can sort this out. No, Katrina, I'll let you know as soon as I can hear you.
If you give Katrina another couple of seconds, if not, I can talk through this slide. 1 second.
No, Katrina, I'll let you know as soon as I can hear anything.
Okay, guys, I think we need to move on with this. So, Michael, if you can present on this slide, it looks pretty straightforward to me, the
That's
explanation
absolutely
spoke to
fine.
point. Could you do that, please?
Yeah, not a problem. This obviously just sets out the planning process, which you may well already be familiar with. Obviously, we're basically at part one, where we're consulting on proposals before any final decision is made, whether to submit a planning application or not. Obviously, we know that the consultation deadline is the 6 p.m. on the 29th of January, so in a week or two's time. As Rod quite rightly pointed out in the presentation, we're accepting all comments throughout the whole process. So if people have made comments before the additional information came out, then people are we'll accept all comments, whether people have commented once or twice, so they're more than welcome to do so. Once, obviously, if the decision is made by the Ministry of Justice to put in a planning application, then as well as the consultation that's going on at the moment, people will be able to comment on the council's statutory consultation process, which is 21 days, and that the council will be writing to you about that. And then after that, there's a determination period where the council should make a decision whether to approve these planning proposals. Obviously, it's an outline planning application that may be submitted in the future. So that's just asking for the council's view on the principle of a new prison in this location, which, depending on it, will be followed up on by a reserve matters planning application. So this is for essentially just asking for people's views on the principle of development at this stage. So there's about a week or so for people's comments, so they can either, at the end of this slide, it's got the links, which I'm sure you're familiar with, so people can either go online and pass their comments on, or they can email us directly at the email address on the consultation documents. That's that slide.
Do we have Katrina now?
Can you hear me?
We can, Katrina, thank you.
All right, I've taken my headphones off.
That was a great idea. Who had that?
Sorry about that, people. Just bear with me while I untangle myself. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Absolutely.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and sorry for the technical hitch. My name is Katrina Holtz, and I work for Cushman & Wakefield, and I advise the MOJ on planning matters in relation to the new prison project. And thank you, Michael, for stepping in there to go through the planning process. I just thought I'd take you through the sort of planning policy context for those of you who don't sort of readily understand it. So the development plan for Aylesbury Vale, which is the district council area where the prisons sit, consist of the saved policies of the Aylesbury Vale local plan. This was adopted in 2004, so it's quite an old plan now, and the council are in the process of preparing a new local plan. So planning decisions by law have to comply with local plan policies unless other material considerations apply. Could I have the next slide, please? So in planning terms, key material considerations are an emerging new local plan that is advanced in its preparation, and the National Planning Policy Framework, which is the government's overarching policies that guide development across the country. In this case, the new local plan is at an advanced stage, and it's proposed or likely to be adopted in 2021. So the policies in that emerging document are a material consideration when the local planning authority comes to make any planning decisions. Next slide, please. So this site is not allocated in either the current or the emerging plan and is outside any settlement development limits. To be clear, generally local plans allocate sites for housing and employment and town centre uses. So a prison wouldn't be allocated in a local plan. It's a special form of development that would be considered on its own merits. As you're aware, the site's within the open countryside. It's not within any settlement development limits. Planning policy does allow some limited sympathetic expansion to existing businesses, agricultural development, rural tourism and leisure. The new prison, as I've already said, would represent a departure from the development plan, and therefore, in order to bring it forward as a special form of development, a case would need to be made based on the need for the new prison in this particular location. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So apart from the principle of development, the new prison, if it was submitted as a planning application, would be judged against a range of what are called development management policies. So those are policies governing a range of topics, such as efficient use of natural resources, landscape, heritage, ecology, highways, residential amenity, drainage, flooding, etc. And a suite of technical documents will accompany the planning application if it comes forward to demonstrate compliance with the key sort of development policies. I must emphasise that if a planning application were to be submitted, then all of those documents would be available for you to view on the council's portal. So you would be able to look at all those documents, whether they be flood risk assessments, transport assessments, or the ecology work, that would be readily available to anybody who wanted to view it. Next slide, please. I just touch on a couple of other matters. We understand that highways is an issue for local people. In terms of construction traffic, this will be modelled and managed within the construction management plan, and that would have to be approved as part of any planning application. The modelling of the construction traffic will take into account other developments in the district, including HS2. As part of the transport assessment work, our sort of consultant highway engineers will be looking at local highway the local highway network and assessing that, and also in sort of liaising with the highway authority, assessing various junctions that are in proximity to the development and assessing the capacity of those, and where it's deemed that the capacity that the junction is at capacity or over capacity, then looking for mitigation and how improvements could be made to those junctions to accommodate additional traffic. Likewise, in terms of the operational phase of the development, that's when the prison would be up and running if it was to come forward. The transport assessment will assess the traffic movements that would emanate from staff and visitors coming to and from the prison. As has already been talked about, travel plan will be included as part of the planning application submission, and will set out how sustainable transport modes could be encouraged, recognising that this obviously is a rural location. The other issue that's been raised is about flood risk and drainage. Again, we're undertaking a lot of technical flood risk and drainage work, and as those are developed and put into our sort of reports, if a planning application comes forward, they will support the planning application. Our flood risk engineers have been in discussions with the lead local flood authority. There's ongoing dialogue, and we're obviously going to include sustainable drainage features, so things such as attenuation basins within the site, which can actually be made to so that ecological features that can enhance biodiversity across the site. So that, as I said, there's ongoing dialogue continuing with the relevant authorities in terms of the drainage strategy. And you know, we welcome any sort of local intelligence from local residents, which could inform our strategy where appropriate. As we've already said, your feedback will be very welcome. There's various means by which you can have your say. Either go to the consultation website, or you can email us directly, or go on to the digital communications link, and you can do that up till the end of January the 29th. But if a planning application were to be submitted, then you would have an opportunity to put your sort of representations into the council via the planning portal. And just to make it clear, during the application process, if further amendments were required by the local planning authority and they were significant, the local planning authority would then reconsult on the updated proposal, so there would then be further opportunities for you to make your representations. And then the next step is your questions. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation. I'll hand over to Michael.
Yeah, Jack, if you close the presentation, it's probably easier if Kim wants to pick up some of the questions that
please.
Quite a lot of questions. So if we leave it with Kim, and then we can see who's best to answer it in the projects team here.
Okay, thank you, MOJ, for your presentation. I have to say, very underwhelming, and I'm afraid you've got a fight on your hands. You won't be having that prison here. I think I'm very disappointed. Several times I asked over the past few weeks, I want verification. Why can it not go to Bullingdon or other sites? You've given no assessment. There's been nothing in the public domain about assessments of other suitable sites. Can somebody answer that? Where can we find this information? Rod does not do this for a living, and yet his presentation was thorough, supported, research. He's done it to the nth degree, but we've got nothing from you guys. So I'm very sorry. Bullingdon, we've had our own consultant to explore it. It's actually 16.59 hectares, very suitable. And yet Grendon Underwood is only 12 hectares plus development site. So that doesn't ring true for me. Also, Phil Cronshaw, no, nothing personal, but your KPIs are very unimpressive. 16 iPads. I'm sorry, we can raise more than that in our rural community. Now, there is a lack of information as well. You've mentioned several times about potential Spring Hill development. There's lack of information on that. So I would just like somebody to answer now for us live why you are not forthcoming about Bullingdon being a suitable site. We've done our research. We know that MOD own the site. We also know that MOJ have leases registered on site. So please don't think that we know a little bit more than you're giving us credit for. We know that MOJ land at Spring Hill is a win-win for you guys. It would be easy, but it's not going to be easy because we are going to fight for this all the way, and very, very strongly. So please now, somebody could speak to me about Bullingdon. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I think Robin might be best placed to respond directly on the point you made about Bullingdon. So I'll just hand over to Robin quickly.
Sorry, thanks Michael, thanks Kim. So as I say, we have spoken to all of the other major landholding government departments about the land that they've got, including the MOD, and they haven't offered us that as part of this work. We've been, believe me, we've been looking for sites, other government department sites.
But Robin, forgive my ignorance, surely they're not going to offer it to you. We're not offering you Grendon Underwood, and yet you think you're going to take it. Well, you're not going to take it. So we want to know in writing exactly the reasoning behind it not going to Bullingdon. There is no reason. You can lease the land as you have done already.
I think the reasoning there is that the MOD aren't willing to let us have access to the land. And
yet the government asset register shows the disposal of many sites. So I'm very, very surprised. I mean, what is the reasoning? Why won't they let you have the land?
I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm afraid.
Oh, come on, Robin,
I'm just seeing if any of my colleagues have got anything else that they would want to add on Bullingdon. Somebody
does know. Come on, you're not that unintelligent. I'm sure you must know there's the reason behind it.
I'm just reading through the comments box and the chat box. I know we haven't got time to go through everyone's questions, but I've been trying to just pull out the ones that maybe haven't been addressed, which connects to yours. So this whole strategic view about where a prison should be placed, part of it is the actual local location of it. So let's say Bullingdon versus Grendon, but actually some of it is a strategic decision about where prisons are needed in the UK and why a rural location in Buckinghamshire seems to be on your list. So when you've got a whole strategy from Boris government about levelling up and things being developed perhaps away from the southeast. So answering the strategic question about location, have you got any research that you can share with us about why in Buckinghamshire you think there's a need for a prison when actually it goes against all the government strategic objective of levelling up the country?
Shall I kick off on that one? With some thoughts and bring colleagues in as relevant. So I think there's sort of two things in tension, probably, or possibly more, in the question that you raised there. So on the one hand, there is a really clear government agenda to level up, as you say, in the north, in the Midlands to an extent, and in other places. Which kind of pushes you towards more investment in other parts of the country, and indeed we are doing that in building a new prison in Yorkshire. The other part of the tension is where are the right parts of the country, where in the country is there demand for prison places, and of course that's much more distributed than the levelling up agenda point. So to an extent we've got to try and square that circle. I recognise that clearly we are not talking about an urban area by any stretch of the imagination, far from it. So there's that challenge. There's also the challenge on us to move relatively swiftly with what we know is coming through the system in terms of prison demand. So we've got to square geography, time, and the sites that that we know and have within the MOJ estate and within the wider government estate. Unfortunately, all of those things don't line up in a perfect way, and kind of trying to flow all of that through is kind of why we're getting to the sites that that we are getting to. I don't know whether anyone else in the team wants to add anything.
That feels quite an unsatisfactory answer, I think, because I think what we'll be envisaging is seeing a pipeline or a funnel of 100 locations looked at, sifting down to a shortlist, and there's no evidence of that taking place that we can see. So I think it just doesn't stack up that that you're describing this sort of trying to mesh the two strategies together, and you end up with a village in Buckinghamshire which is already under massive infrastructure strain as a target location. The whole thing about speed and cost and stuff hardly fits with the strategic decision about a prison that's going to last 20, 30, 40 years when you're trying to build it in a couple of years to try and beat a timescale. So I think, to be honest, that answer, again, I think will raise a lot of concern amongst the parishioners when we collate the feedback at the end of this evening. But I think that strategic one is one that we still would like an answer to, and perhaps you'd like to go away and reflect on that as a team, and come back to us with your thoughts on it. The other thing which I picked out from the chat, Kim, which just to help try and collate some stuff here, is about the whole thing about design. And I think we've all noted quite a bit in the presentation about the fact that design is supposed to be, you know, sort of, I don't know, sympathetic and fits a typical urban landscape. I think was used a few phrases and a few times. And one has to look at Grendon and Spring Hill and Edgecott and think it's hardly an urban landscape. So why would we think that an urban design would actually fit in that location? It just feels a very odd way of saying that it's going to fit in nicely, because you've seen these buildings or similar buildings in town centres and city centres. I don't quite get the rationale for that. Perhaps you could explain how you think it might actually fit with that strategy.
I'll take that question. So yeah, I guess the intention is not that the buildings from a aesthetic perspective are intended to fit with the context that they're sat in. It is a prison, and they have to be contextually appropriate for that. They are inward looking. It is a closed prison and fence, so the views of those buildings are generally from inside the prison, and they're designed to be community looking buildings to normalise the experience for the residents that are using them, so that we are not institutionalising people that are very close to release. But equally, if you come to the entrance and resource hub building, which is public facing to a degree, albeit it's not going to be really particularly visible from Grendon Road, so it has a limited impact from that side of the proposed development. But you do get community buildings in more rural settings as well. You know, community centres and the like exist in many smaller urban settlements. So I think there is a degree of appropriateness there, and we will try and, you know, in terms of the material selection and the way we suite it, you know, that will be worked to be as sympathetic as possible with its local context as possible. But we can't get away from the function that they do need to have as those prison buildings. So I hope that answers your question to a degree, Mike.
So Tim.
Hi.
Hi. Have you and your team actually been to site?
I have, which is unusual because I'm the project director, and I don't necessarily tend to be the person who does end up going to site. But yes, I and a number of my colleagues have been to site in recent months to walk the site all the way around the site, and you know, adjusted proposals that were on the ground even at that time. But at the moment there is much more design work to do to resolve this site if it gets agreed in terms of outline planning.
So can you just tell me, sorry to interrupt.
Excuse me, I'm really sorry, we can't have the meeting taken over. You need to use the chat box because there's a lot of repetition, and our agreement with MOJ is that we would field the questions. I'm very sorry. Mike, have you got some more there?
Well, the other one, I think, so we touched on strategy, which touched on design. The other thing which I think came across very strongly in Rod's presentation and the questions that I'm picking up is the whole thing around the actual how, if a prison got built there, how it actually work in terms of housing, the employment, and the travel of people who might want to work at the prison. Given the house prices locally are way above the national average, and certainly the locations of other prisons, actually we just don't have local prison officers in our current prisons living locally. I think there are 4 in the Grendon area that live in Grendon who work in the current prison. So it feels like there's a real mismatch between building a location for prisons and all the team that work there, and then trying to think, how do you actually make it work? And that travel distance you've talked about, just goes against everything about where the economy is going and where the environmental debate's going in terms of shorter journeys to work, shorter commutes. I just can't see how a village 10 miles to the nearest town, and those towns aren't large either, can provide the population to work in the different jobs that might come through this location of a prison. So any thoughts on that sort of housing, the travel? It just feels your numbers were very much around, well, within 25 miles or 40 miles, it's okay. But that, to be honest, feels a very, very poor way of planning strategically how a workforce might work in the future, especially in a rural environment. Any thoughts, guys, on those questions, which were quite common going through the chat box?
Thanks. I think Nick might be able to help us out on the operation of the prison in the future. We're obviously subject to planning, so I'll just hand over to Nick if he's happy to pick up on those points.
Yeah, recruitment is always a challenge, and we've identified that on some of the sites as well. But we do work closely with the local councils, particularly Full Sutton Prison has been mentioned, which is a challenging site, and we then develop our strategy around that, about the best identification of recruitment. So, example, at Full Sutton, there is already a high security prison there on site that's got over 600 staff employed there. We've done some analysis through that, working with that prison, identifying where those staff travel from, how far they come in, and then we'll work with the local council to then identify where these people are coming from, how we can then facilitate that. And then when it comes to the operation of the prison, that's something that we can potentially consider about best routes for getting people in. So it is potentially a similar situation that we have at Full Sutton Prison. It is very close to York in Yorkshire. It is also a challenging recruitment area. But the work that the local council have done around the local labour market information, identifying the current routes that over 600 staff are already taking in, and where those pockets are where people aren't coming from, can then be targeted then through a targeted recruitment campaign.
Okay, thank you for answering that one. Thank you.
Okay.
There was a final one I've just picked up, I suppose is more tactical in the short term, is during the construction phase. We know that the area around the village has been very adversely affected by a huge amount of infrastructure projects, whether that's the incinerator within the parish, whether it's the East West Rail, whether it's been HS2. We've had a huge amount go through, which is ongoing over the next few years. We know that each of the organisations looking after those projects say, well, my project's okay, it won't affect you too much. When you add it all together, we all know as residents that it has a massive impact on the local community and our ability to enjoy our community during these huge projects. Any thoughts on how you would work and realistically make sure that you can answer people's queries about the impact of the infrastructure projects themselves?
I'm Michael Otsuki. I'll take this one. So look, we would work across the different departments and ministries with colleagues, and at a local level, I work with my counterpart in construction at the Department for Transport at high speed, etc. And we would work together to minimise impact. From a construction point of view, we're a couple of years early, as it were, so I couldn't give you the nitty-gritty details of what that would actually look like. But yes, we would work across Whitehall to make sure that we are minimising impacts. Certainly, large type of infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's Kim. There's loads of stuff on the chat, which just for the benefit of parishioners, we will collate all of the chat at the end of this evening. So we won't lose any of the questions and comments that you've been putting on there. So forgive that we can't get to everything. I think Paul, one of our councillors, wants to say something as well. Paul, do you want to just come in?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I would. I'd like to pick up again on your strategic theme and ask Robin, the project director.
Can't hear you, Paul.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Like I said, I was reading a note. I'd like to ask Robin, the project director, really two things.
Paul, you need to look at the screen. You keep looking the other way and we can't hear you.
I'll move my note. I'd like to ask Robin, who is the project director, if I may, where he gets his political directive from. I understand Robin to be a civil servant, and civil as I was for many, many years, and my wife also. Civil servants work to political directions, presumably from the Minister of State for Prisons and Probation, who I think is Lucy Fraser, or from the Secretary of State for Justice, who's Robert Buckland, if you're working to those directives, presumably they include the HMG's major policy of levelling up. Can you confirm that you are working to such directive? And if so, may we see it? The second question, throughout my professional career, I worked for the Ministry of Defence or businesses working to the Ministry of Defence. And I simply cannot understand that you feel there are no redundant airfields, munitions factories, and so on and so forth in those areas requiring levelling up. Could you give us a list of such sites that you have considered in the Midlands, the North and the East, and that you have considered and rejected before you decided to embark upon this proposal? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So on your first one, yes, exactly. We work in that political direction line from the Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State and Britain's Minister Robert Buckland and Lucy Fraser. Yeah, clearly levelling up is a big part of government policy, and it's one that the MOJ tries to play a role in as far as it can to support. But equally, there are other kind of policy imperatives on us. We don't just need to build prisons in the north and in the Midlands. We also need to build them in the southeast. And on your second question, yep, we have spoken to the MOD about their land. I'm not in a position to share a list of it at the moment, I'm afraid. Sorry.
You want me to give it to you?
Paul, we can't hear you, Paul.
There are many, many, many redundant MOD sites, some within a few miles from here, God forbid, many in Lincolnshire, many in Yorkshire. Why haven't you given us the details of your considerations that led you to discard those possibilities? Don't tell me you can't appropriate land from one government department to another. That's ludicrous.
So clearly it's absolutely possible to get land from one government department to another. Of course it is. We've done it in the past and we've sought to do it again this time. We don't need to build any more new prisons in Yorkshire or the Northwest, or in Yorkshire. We're looking at the Northwest and the Southeast at the moment as part of this programme, because those are the locations in which we need them. So we're not looking at Lincolnshire. It would be the wrong place to build.
Could you therefore give us your rationale that we require another one in Buckinghamshire? We've already got Woodhill, we've got Bullingdon a few miles away in Oxfordshire, we've got Wellingborough being built 40 miles away. Where is the justification then for one here, if there's not one in those areas requiring levelling up? Could you give us that written justification, please?
I'm happy to tell you that, well, not happy to tell you, but I can tell you that there is a need for more prison capacity in the southeast of England.
Can you provide us the evidence?
I'm not sure what. Yeah. Pardon?
Can you provide us factual, numerical evidence of that?
I'm not sure what we can put into the public domain on that. We've got the national level prisoner population.
This is a public consultation, but we can't see anything. Super.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think, again, let's left that one unanswered. There's a few questions, I think, which we can't answer, or we haven't got answered tonight. I think, again, we've got our other representatives, our councillors and our MP that we can approach for those that formally as well. Kim, pass back to you.
So I think
but over to you.
What we'll need to do is we'll need to start to wrap up, but MOJ will have a full copy of this evening's meeting, and I would very much appreciate it, Michael, as you've been in communication with us, that you could see to it that everything is answered that has been put to the MOJ. You can see we're not satisfied with some of your responses, MOJ. I think you're lacking in your homework. That's very disappointing for us. Congratulations to Rod. I think you were fantastic tonight, Rod, and you represented our opinions very well indeed. And thank you, Paul, and everyone. I think that we should close, but before we do, I just want to ask Angela and Greg if there is anything they would like to say.
Hi, Kim, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I don't see.
Angela, press your mute button on the left. That's it. No, press it again.
Got it.
That's it. Yes.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I don't want to prolong this at all, but I do want to say I think Rod encapsulated many of the concerns that people have written to me about, and I'm sure Greg's got the same as well. We've had a lot of representations. All I would say is there are some very common themes, and I will be representing those at the council's cabinet meeting on Monday, which I've asked for specially so that we can debate this in public. I would just say to everybody, there's only 100 people on this call, but there's still time until the 29th to tell everybody you know to put your representations in. And I'm extremely dissatisfied, particularly with the lack of transparency around the consideration for alternative sites. This has been asked for on many occasions, not just Bullingdon. The southeast is a very large area, and you've talked about the fact you've done an assessment, and we haven't seen any transparent evidence of that, and I would like to see that, please, because I think Grendon and Spring Hill site has got some very, very clear restrictions in terms of its rurality and many other of the issues that have been discussed this evening. So, Kim, I won't go on, but I've listened very hard. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Angela. Greg, is there anything that you would like to say?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I absolutely echo everything Angela has said, and I very much hope at the Buckinghamshire Council Cabinet meeting, the corporate position, which is obviously a separate position to the planning process, but the corporate position of the council is to come out against this prison being built here. I certainly came into this meeting this evening knowing that when I put in my formal response to the consultation at the end of this month, which I'm leaving right till the last minute so that I can incorporate as many different resident objections as I possibly can. And thank you to everyone who's copied in their objections to me as you have sent them in. Please do keep them coming, that I would submit my view that I am against it. And I'm afraid to say that the presentation this evening has made me even more hardened against the concept of this prison being built here. From everything here, from Rod's excellent presentation, I won't repeat the points, but for me, the real highlights are the cumulative impact of everything else that is going on is so important. Even if you just take every concept of it being a prison away and just see it as an unacceptable additional burden, additional miseries on residents in this area, it is absolutely something that we just cannot go there as a community, or, you know, speaking as a government backbencher, go there as a government either. And the levelling up points I absolutely agree with that have been made earlier. And fundamentally, I've got to say this is a rural community, this is the countryside, and talk of buildings that look like they belong in a town centre that was then followed up with, oh, well, yeah, they look a bit like community centres. Well, no, I've never seen a community centre that looks like any of the drawings that we have seen tonight. It's not in the local plan. It's open countryside. People did not move to this area or grew up in this area in order to live in urban sprawl or a city or a town. It is the countryside, and, you know, frankly, we are taking a big enough hit from HS2 and East West Rail. You know, I'm pretty certain we've stopped the expressway, but, you know, those other two things are enough, bluntly, and I will be going into bat so hard to ensure that we do not suffer any more with this prison, and certainly some of the detailed questions where some people have been suggesting freedom of information requests. Well, I can save everybody the time on that, because as we've been going, I've been submitting a number of written parliamentary questions which have the same effect as freedom of information requests. The difference is that I can name the day by which they have to be answered in the process. And so I say to civil servants from these, some of the questions that you've been asked in the chats this evening, particularly around the detailed assessments, are the land considered? There are written parliamentary questions coming from me, and obviously those will be a matter of public record, and I will be sharing them with everybody on this call. So I'm absolutely on everybody's side on this. Thank you to Rod in particular for such a detailed presentation, and let's keep going. Strength in numbers.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So I think the next step will be the recording will be posted onto the Grendon Underwood Parish Council website and onto the Edgecott Parish Council website. Outstanding questions should and hopefully will be answered by MOJ in a timely manner. So 48 hours, guys, considering you do it for a living and we all have different day jobs. I think that's acceptable. Do you agree? Is that okay? Nodding of the heads, Mr. Seaton.
Sorry, just trying to come off mute. Yeah, we'll get back to you as quickly as we can.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. And please be thorough in your responses, as Rod has been in his presentation. The more detail, the better for us. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I should just like to say, although only 100 participants, the reason being we were only licensed for 100. So please spread the word amongst friends, neighbours, communities that it is in the public domain. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Councils, can you remain on screen? And thank you to Angela and Cameron and to Greg. You've led hectic lives and we very much appreciate your support. It's thank you very much from all of us.
Thank you for organising it, Kim. Brilliant.